way more aggression than I thought we would see. And I know that his ADOT was really, really low. But that's kind of just the way New Orleans plays. I think his ADOT in Carolina will be much higher. He has Robbie Anderson. He has Curtis Samuel. He has DJ Moore. He has Christian McCaffrey. He has Ian Thomas. He has an atrocious defense. It's really low. I mean, 279.1 QB 21. I know you're tempted on Teddy Bridgewater. Evan, talk to me about him.
Yeah, I've done a few tweets about Teddy Bridgewater's fantasy outlook, and it's funny. Like you get like pushback about the quarterback, 21 in ADP, and it's like the fish are starting to come out. They're starting to come out. But yeah, I mean Teddy Bridgewater, his cost in drafts is so minimal right now. You could literally get him as your quarterback 3. And I think he's going to be a really underrated quarterback too. And I think that he has been depicted as a game manager by myself included, and I think that has been an accurate way to depict Teddy Bridgewater to this point. But I think that there are a lot of reasons to think that Teddy Bridgewater's his statistics this year could go beyond like game manager statistics because of the situation. The Panthers can surround him with one of the best young pass catcher cores in the league, and that's from DJ Moore to Curtis Samuel to Robbie Anderson, who at very worst is like a dynamic role player. Ian Thomas has really shined in past opportunities to play in place of Greg Olsen. He's going to get that full-time opportunity this year. They hired Joe Brady to be their OC. They do not have continuity in the coaching staff, and I do think that that's somewhat of a concern. But I think that concern is mitigated by the fact that Teddy Bridgewater was with Joe Brady with the Saints in 2017, and Joe Brady then went on to coach or to be the passing game coordinator at LSU, and that was maybe the best passing game in college football history. And then I think that because this defense, I mean, it's incredible. All the talent that the Panthers lost on defense, and they weren't a good defense to begin with. They lost Luke Kuechly, who might be a Hall of Famer. James Bradbury, easily their number one cornerback. Eric Reed led them in tackles. He's gone. Mario Addison led them in sacks. He's gone. Bruce Irvin went back to Seattle. He had 8.5 sacks for them last year. Vernon Butler went to Buffalo. He had 6 sacks last year. Gerald McCoy had 5 sacks. He's gone. Dontari Poe, who started 10 games for them on the interior last year, he's gone to Dallas. They're starting nickelback, Javian Elliott. Ross Cockrell, who played 75% of the snaps in their defensive secondary last year, played some safety, some outside corner, some slot corner. He's gone. And then if you look at their early season schedule, it is highly, highly favorable. At least within the first 5 games, there are 3 smash spots at home against the Raiders in week 1, at home against the Cardinals in week 4, and then in week 5, visiting the Falcons inside that dome where lots and lots of points get scored. I think that Bridgewater is a guy that can absolutely start fast. And I think he's going to need to start fast because I think that this is going to be a team that loses a lot of games like 31-24, 34-27.
Yeah, totally agree on Teddy. And I think if you're taking that 3 late round quarterback strategy for best ball, I like pairing Stafford, Bridgewater, and one other one that you like to give you 3. And I think you can do that really affordably. Speaking of affordably, like in the previous eras of fantasy football, like Ryan Tannehill would be like a high pick. People would be all excited about Ryan Tannehill because he had such a good year last year. He was QB9 last year in points per game. But the community has advanced so much that he's now QB20. 221.4. And I get it. His TD rate, his yards per attempt were like Hall of Fame type numbers. Obviously, that's not going to sustain, but we should see more volume out of Ryan Tannehill this year. He still gives you rushing equity. He still has AJ Brown. I think Ryan Tannehill, and I think we might disagree a little bit here. I think Ryan Tannehill is actually a value at his cost, not by a lot, but I think that he's actually at 221.4 QB20. I actually prefer to be above market on Ryan Tannehill. I still prefer Teddy, but I think Ryan Tannehill is going to be fine. Like the market is over adjusted to his numbers, his rates from last year. So where are you at with Ryan Tannehill?
Yeah, I think that Ryan Tannehill is like the anti Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who is going to be a game manager, or has been a game manager and is going to remain a game manager. First of all, Derrick Henry drew the softest schedule in the league from a run defense standpoint, and also the Titans drew the second easiest schedule overall from an opponent win totals based standpoint. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Ryan Tannehill's schedule, especially to open the season, it is brutal. At Denver in week 1, especially in those weeks 1 and 2 games, going to Denver is one of the worst places that you can possibly begin your season. You're immediately going to play like in the mountains. Warren Sharp has shown that over the last 20 years, the Broncos have some insane 900% win percentage over the last 20 years when they play at Denver in weeks 1 and 2. Week 2 at home against Jacksonville. I mean, that's Derrick Henry's running for 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. Then at Minnesota, facing a defense, in the Vikings that is definitely undergoing a lot of change, but is still coached by Mike Zimmer, and I don't think that that's any kind of a gimme. And then against the Steelers and the Bills, two of the top 5 pass defenses in the league to round out those first 5 games. So Tannehill, he's a guy I'm fine with, taking in best ball, I'd say. But, man, he's not someone that I'm going out of my way to draft. And he's certainly due for a ton of regression from an efficiency standpoint. Led the NFL in yards per attempt, led the NFL in yards per completion, and in passer rating. And, we saw what happened in those playoff games, and that's a little bit scary where he just gets into a situation where he's just handing the ball off to Derrick Henry. And so that lowers his ceiling and his floor. And look, I think the Titans are going to be a good team this year. I like the over on their 8.5 game win total. And I think that Tannehill is good as a piece of the puzzle in their offense. But I think that in fantasy, just too many red flags, too many negatives for me to I would definitely take Teddy over him, and I'd probably take Gardner Minshew over him.
Yep. Okay, we'll get to Minshew in a second. You mentioned handing the ball off a ton. That's what Jimmy Garoppolo did in a lot of the games last year when San Francisco was just dominating on defense. If you think there's room for regression, and year-over-year stickiness of defense is very light, and I think San Francisco's defense is going to regress to some degree. Maybe we see more volume from Jimmy Garoppolo. And if we see more volume, well, he was very efficient last year. It's really, to me, a bet on how good you think the 49ers will be. If they're as good as they were last year defensively and running the ball, I think this 288 ADP QB 22 for Jimmy Garoppolo is right. But if their defense regresses, if their run game regresses, there's a lot of ways that it can go worse for San Francisco, and they need more out of Jimmy G. Well, then you might be talking about a value. So Jimmy Garoppolo at QB 22, Evan, I believe that you like him at that price.
Yes, I do. And I think that he's a player that is going to continue to be highly efficient within the context of, a beautifully orchestrated offense where they upgraded by trading up in the first round for another receiver in Brandon Ayuk. And George Kittle just played he played last season, on one leg. Mm-hmm. And was still a massive difference maker. Deebo Samuel entering his second year. I really liked how the offensive line is coming together even after losing Joe Staley to retirement. Of course, they trade for Trent Williams. Mike McGlinchey is back. And I think that defensively, they had some holes defensively last year. They weren't a shutdown defense for the entirety of the season. They still have questions at the number 2 cornerback position, and now Richard Sherman is a year older. So I definitely think that they could be put in, maybe some higher scoring situations this year, and Jimmy Garoppolo's pass attempts could rise. Jimmy G is now, by the way, 21-5 in his career with a Super Bowl berth. And people still say that this guy sucks. This past year, he was number 3 in yards per attempt among quarterbacks. He was number 7 in touchdown rate, number 8 in passer rating. And last year, it was a perfect kind of storm for the 49ers to win with the formula that they did. And I do think it's likely that they have to throw the ball more often this year. And then if you look at the schedule that he opens up with, super, super favorable. I mean, this is a guy that if you want to take Daniel Jones, take Jimmy Garoppolo 2 rounds later in your best ball draft. And I think you're going to, you will have a quarterback that is going to have a really favorable schedule early in the season, complementing a quarterback whose schedule is going to open up right in time, just in time for Garoppolo's to get a little bit tougher in weeks 1 through 6. This is at home against the Cardinals. Garoppolo faces at home versus the Cardinals in week 1, at the Jets in week 2, at home against the Eagles in a potential shootout in week 3. I'm sorry, the Giants before that, and the Giants, they're a definite shootout team. Mm-hmm. And then finishing up with the Dolphins and the Rams over those first 6 games. I mean, I think that might be the easiest or the most fantasy-friendly weeks 1 through 6 schedule of any quarterback in the league that Jimmy Garoppolo drew for 2020.
Yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo, also one of the founding members of Team Sex, for sure, Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay, some really late guys here that I want to mention. Tyrod Taylor and Gardner Minshew. The question with Tyrod is, A, how much will he run at this point in his career? He's getting older as a mobile quarterback. Can we rely on that as much? B, how much is Anthony Lynn going to mess this thing up and not let Tyrod Taylor spread his wings? And C, when will they go to the rookie, Justin Herbert? So those are all questions why Tyrod Taylor is like undrafted in most leagues right now completely. I understand he has awesome weapons. I mean, God, you could argue he has some of the best weapons in the entire league with Mike Williams and Keenan and Hunter Henry. Shout out to Donald Parham, Eckler, et cetera, et cetera. But there are concerns with Tyrod, as I mentioned at the top. But again, he's free. So I'm curious if you think Tyrod should be drafted in some of these leagues where most teams emerge with 2 and sometimes 3 quarterbacks.
And I think that just because the likelihood that Justin Herbert gets in there, or just the probability that happens, based historically, because these quarterbacks that go in the top 10, they play. But I do think that you can kind of theorize a scenario where Tyrod hangs on to this job longer than expected because the Chargers, well, first of all, the schedule, again, is really in working in his favor. I think that he will keep the job as long as he is successful. And I think the Chargers can be successful facing this schedule with the personnel that they have. They also have a lot of continuity. I mean, Anthony Lynn is coming back as the head coach. The defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley, is back. They got a lot more talented on defense aside from just getting back Derwin James. The offensive coordinator who replaced Ken Wisenhunt, Shane Steichen, he is back as well. And Tyrod Taylor knows him because he was the quarterback's coach before that. So he's got a year in the system. Justin Herbert, probably, just limited reps. It looks like we are going to get, maybe a decent chunk of training camp this year, but I think he's still going to be in a limited rep situation. And Tyrod Taylor, with that running ability and with all those weapons, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, I think he's pretty much set up for success. Let's talk about the schedule real quick, though. Week 1 at the Bengals. I mean, I don't think anyone is going to be afraid of the Bengals defense this year. Go back home and face the Chiefs in a potential shootout in week 2. Staying at home in week 3 to face the Panthers, maybe the worst defense in the league. Mm-hmm. After that, they go face the Bucs. I think that could be challenging, but also has some chances to be high scoring. Then at the Superdome, same sort of situation. Come back home, face the Jets. Incredible matchup there. Then they face the Dolphins, and then the Jaguars, and then the Raiders. So, as long as Tyrod can keep this job, I mean, I think that he's going to hover in that 10 to 14 range among quarterbacks with some spikes mixed in against some of these weaker defenses.
Yeah, okay. And the other guy who's undrafted that we need to mention is Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew has Jay Gruden now, who I don't want to call him a quarterback whisperer, but has done okay things with the quarterbacks that he's had. He has some reasonable weapons in DJ Shark. They drafted Laviska Shenault. Gardner Minshew gives you a little bit of rushing equity. I'm not too excited about Gardner Minshew. I think we can do better with like our QB3 pick, but I think there's some reason for optimism on him. And we really haven't spent any time this offseason on the Jaguars pass game. We talked a lot about Leonard Fournette's situation, but yeah, in general, what do you think about the Jaguars pass game?
Well, I think that Gardner Minshew in some ways fits the bill of quarterbacks that have had success in Jay Gruden's system. Now, this offense does have turnover. They're changing offensive coordinators, but I